And as we mentioned, China says it will raise import tariffs on $60 billion in American goods from 5 to 25% starting June 1st. The announcement comes just hours after President Trump warned Beijing that China's economy would, quote, hurt very badly if it doesn't sign a deal with the U.S. In a tweet, he said companies will be forced to leave China for other countries because it would be too expensive to buy in China. You had a great deal, almost completed, and then you backed out. Chinese state media put out its own response overnight in the People's Daily, saying China has been pushing forward the bilateral talks with a high sense of responsibility and maximize sincerity, but it will never yield to the extreme pressure from the U.S. or compromise on matters of principle. Rick, let's bring you back into the conversation. We got the announcement from China on retaliation. The question is, what other steps can they take? Because the Chinese export much more than they import. We've talked in the past about the Chinese not buying up treasuries and manipulating their currency further. Is that back on the table now, given the tensions?
That would be extreme. I mean, that would be open warfare. What they can do more easily is what's called non-tariff barriers, which is, they basically have power over the whole economy. They can just make it difficult for American companies to operate there. That can be local authorities, announcing surprise inspections and saying, we have to close your facility until you pass the inspection. I mean, they can do all kinds of stuff like that. There was a dispute with a South Korean supermarket chain a couple of years ago, and out of nowhere, they just shut down all the outlets in China until they resolve whatever the issue was there. And they could do that with American companies.
So what's the next step, I guess, is the question for all of us.
I think what's happening here is this is exactly the kind of escalation you don't want to see. And I think about that in a couple of different ways. First of all, this has gone from private negotiations to what is now basically a public spat between President Trump. This is personal to him, and so his ego is now directly involved. And it's also personal to President Xi, and he also has a notable ego. So now we're in a situation where these two guys are kind of thumping their chests and saying, I'm not going to be the one who backs down here. This is bad. This is not the way you want this to go, because it makes it harder to get kind of a win-win scenario. I think the other thing that is new now that we've seen Trump say he's going to put these tariffs on and actually put the tariffs on is he has indicated he is not willing to accept a cosmetic deal. And I think one of the assumptions in markets was that Trump he needs a win, he will take any deal, and we're going to get past this anytime soon. I think Trump has said basically that is not good enough for me, because if this is actually true that the Chinese kind of changed the terms and reneged a little bit, Trump could have just gone along with that as the cost of getting to a deal, and he said, I'm not going to do that.
Although the X factor has always been the market, right? I mean, if it tumbles even
still
further,
the market.
he's going to be watching
it. It is still the market, and I think one of these sort of really interesting sort of dynamics here is trying to estimate what is President Trump's own threshold for pain. I mean, how much of a
downturn? What is his bottom?
How much of a downturn in markets is he? He keeps coming out and saying it's not my fault. It's the fault of the Chinese. It's the fault of the Federal Reserve. But we also see him. I mean, he's very nervous. You can tell he's very nervous about the market. So, how much of a downturn in stocks is he willing to, bear himself as the cost of his trade war? I don't think it's 10%. I think it's less than 10%, and we will get close to 10% before long, and that could be it.
And with the Dow at 560, you got to wonder, how nervous he would be getting, especially with 2020 fast approaching.